Hello, everyone. My camera is once again not on, um, so that is okay because we're not going to be wanting that so much because we are going to want to focus on MuseScore a little more. But anyhow, my name is Marc Sabatella. I'm the director of the Mastering MuseScore School, and this is the MuseScore Café, my regular weekly series of live streams where I talk about some aspect of creating music with MuseScore. So I'm doing my usual check to make sure I'm live, make sure everything's okay. You all can let me know if anything's wrong with sound, but uh, hopefully everything works fine. I had some technical difficulties last time, and yeah, again, for whatever reason, my camera isn't working, but that's okay. All right, so great. Glad to see so many new people here today. And yeah, I'm going to try to monitor the chat here so that I can keep track of what people are asking me. And actually, let me get that up over on my other screen over here so I am uh, able to see things without having to take up the screen space with it. Okay, guys. So the big topic of the day is the MuseScore 3.5 release, which came out late last week. If you should have already probably received notification that it's available. I guess I don't know how that aspect of it works. But anyone who goes to MuseScore to try to download, like, okay, let me just put in some links into the chat. So this is the download link. Here we go. And then this is the release announcement. And the download link is in there too. Yeah, depending on how things are set up, what operating system you're on, etc., you may or may not have already gotten automatic notification, but you can certainly download and it will replace your 3.4 installation. So one thing that I see right here is a comment about sound font for brass bands, and I have to say I don't spend a lot of time myself exploring different sound font options. I typically am just happy with the default. It's generally as good overall to my ears as anything else that I've ever tried as an alternative. That said, of the things that I personally have tried, Timbres of Heaven was one of my favorites. And I don't know the current link for it or if it's still in development. I liked it a lot in a lot of ways, but it did have some issues that caused me to just go back to the default. One was it was really overly loud, I thought, and then it caused things to clip, and there were the balances between the instruments, was going to require some tweaking because MuseScore was sort of optimized for use with the default sound font we have. So anyhow, I know a lot of other people like one called General User, which is actually created by S. Christian Collins, who also helped us with our default sound font. Okay, so let's go on to what's actually new in MuseScore 3.5, and it's a long list of things that are new. And so I've already talked about many of these things in previous cafes because I did one of these when we had the alpha release, another one when we did the beta release. I don't remember if I did, I don't think I did a separate cafe when we did the release candidate a few weeks ago. But anyhow, it's a lot of stuff. So I'm just going to try to briefly talk about as much as I can. So let's go over to MuseScore here. And this is it, if I did my job right. Make sure I'm in MuseScore 3.5, about 3.5. Yep, there we are. Okay, so the big thing from my personal perspective, everyone's going to have different preferences and whatnot, is chord symbol playback. There you go. Y'all heard that? That was a C chord, right? And it does a surprisingly nice job of actually creating voicings that sound pretty good, really. If I get my Pathétique lead sheet, I like using that as an example. This is an arrangement I did of Beethoven's Sonata Pathétique, and I did some tweaking. So it plays chords, as you can hear, kind of by default. Um, and there's settings in the inspector here to control aspects of exactly how it plays it, what kind of voicing it uses, whether it interprets the chord literally or it throws in extra jazz interpretations. But let me play a couple measures here. Oh, toolbar. Is my toolbar not visible? Is maybe what's going on? Oh, I can't see everything. What the heck is that? Oh, that is the wrong. I see. That's why I don't see my face because you see my feet. That's lovely. Or not, it's not even my feet. All right, let's just go to full screen and get rid of that. All right, so that should help. Thanks for that. That explains why my camera wasn't working. It was my front camera instead of my rear camera, or rear instead of front, whatever, front instead of rear. Here we go. I'm just going to play a little bit of this so you can hear it. So that's Beethoven's Sonata Pathétique with chord symbols that I added that are fairly accurate to what Beethoven wrote, with just little bits of jazzification with that major 7 here. And actually, no, this is actually quite literal here. So it really was really mostly just about that major 7th there. But then I get much more reharmonized later with it. And it does all sorts of really cool things with it. So the chord symbol playback, as I mentioned, is on by default. And this is proving to be a somewhat controversial decision, and we've gone back and forth on it. And I will say that some details might change in the next update. We might want to change some aspects of how this works. But for right now, if you want to disable the chord symbol playback, you come over here to the inspector and turn off play. And you see all those other settings just kind of disappear. And then you can hit set as style. And now you get just the melody, right? So that is a way you can turn off the chord symbol playback in just a few clicks. It's been proposed, and I kind of agree with this, that for older scores that you've already created, if they were lead sheets, you probably want the chord symbol playback on by default. So if you create a lot of lead sheets, you're going to be very happy with that. But if you create a lot of arrangements in which you have the chords already written out but also have chord symbols, you might find the automatic chord symbol playback distracting. And if you do that a lot, you might find those 3 extra clicks there. I click a chord symbol, turn off play, hit set as style. Those 3 extra clicks might be, get old after a while, right? So we're looking at adding a preference, like in edit preferences. It's not there yet. It might be in there in 3.5.1 though. So somewhere in edit preferences, you might have a setting that controls whether existing scores have the chord symbol playback on or not by default. Similarly, for new scores, we might have a separate setting to control whether they're on by default or not. So that's still something that we could use some feedback on. But yes, we do know that there is a question about how that should work. All right, so chord symbol playback. That's one of the big features for me, and so I spent a little longer on that than I'm going to on some of the others. But let me talk about some other things. So if I create a score for, say, flute. Flute. Oh, by the way, since I'm thinking of it right now, here's flute, here's oboe. Nope. Oh, I missed the oboe. Well, it used to be that if I wanted to add oboe, it would add at the end. And so if you had a long list of scores, if you had a long list of things, and then suddenly you realized you were missing the oboe, it was kind of a drag. You'd have to put it here and then use the arrows to move it all the way up. Well, now you can select exactly where you want the oboe added. See, it adds right below whatever's selected. That's another little improvement here. So I just created a score, lots of instruments, and I'm going to use this score for something else too, so just as well. I can add some notes. Well, what if the flute player is supposed to change to piccolo mid-score? Well, we've supported this for a long time. We've supported this for a long time, but the way you had to do it wasn't as obvious as it could be. So you still have to know where to go. You have to know to go to the text palette here, and here's change instrument. But it used to be when you entered this, basically nothing interesting happened, and you're like, well, what next? But now you're going to be kind of guided through the process a little bit. So I'm going to click. I clicked a note here where I want to change to piccolo, and actually, if I really think about it, that's too low of a note for piccolo, right? Let's put it up here. So I hit change instrument, and instantly, instead of just adding the change, it actually asks me what instrument do I want. And so now I can say, well, I want the piccolo here. And you'll see now that it actually put in the change. You can tell, right, that's a flute, that's a piccolo. So even though it's the same pitch, because I guess when I changed octave, maybe it wasn't obvious that that's what was happening. But anyhow, it did that. It also, if there's a clef change required, it puts it in. Now for piccolo, there isn't one required, and this is like a known issue where, well, why did it put it there? It put it there because piccolo sometimes does use an alternate clef, a treble clef with a octave sign below it, and so that's, I think, why that clef is showing up, even though it's not needed in this particular case. Anyhow, so it basically sets all that stuff up for you, and it gives you that opportunity to select the thing. So the process of changing instruments is streamlined quite a bit more now. If there's a clef change required, if there's a key change required, it's going to kind of handle that for you. So while I'm talking about this subject, let me also talk about keys. So I've got a baritone saxophone here, and notice its key signature is A, while the flute is C. Well, that's because a baritone saxophone is a transposing instrument. Well, what if I eventually change keys and I move to the key of E? So let's go ahead, select a measure, and change to E. Well, you see that the transposing instruments get a lot more sharps. Boy, clarinet is sitting on 6 sharps, but 6 sharps, 6 flats, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Ooh, literally true, right? And realistically, clarinet players are going to be more used to seeing sharps, so because they usually add 2 sharps to the key signature, so that's probably good. But the poor baritone sax is now looking at 7 sharps. Now, realistically, a lot of saxophonists are going to say, yeah, give me more sharps. I like sharps. I'm used to sharps. I hardly ever see flats. Please don't give me 5 flats. Let me have 7 sharps. But other saxophonists might be like, no, I'd rather have fewer flats than more sharps. Maybe I play piano also. Maybe I just like flats or whatever. So anyhow, there's a choice now. What you can do is go into the staff properties here. So I'll right click and say staff properties, and then just say prefer sharps or flats. I want to prefer flats. The default will be it does what's literally correct. The literal correct transposition was to add 3 sharps, so by gosh, it does it. But when I say prefer flats, now I get flats instead. Notice it didn't change all my keys to flats, just the ones where it's there was a key change that it makes sense to do that with. So what's a splash hi-hat? Oh, I see, that was, okay. So basically, you can customize drum sets however you want. So if you want to add a drum set, and you want to add drum set, and you want to add, so I'm going to click this, and then I will press N to go to note input mode, and right down here is the edit drum set button. And then when you press that, you will see all the different drum sounds that are sort of known and defined, and if you are using a sound font that actually contains a sample for that, then you can add that, and you would have to know its MIDI pitch and all. The problem is the general MIDI standard just has a fixed list. These are the sounds that all sound fonts support. And if your favorite sound isn't on it, like splash hi-hat is not on that list, sound fonts aren't going to have it. So you're going to have to find a non-standard sound font to use. And they exist out there. You just do a web search for percussion sound font and maybe put in splash as a keyword also. And then once you get a sound font installed, then you can do that. So if you go to the MuseScore handbook, look up sound fonts, it'll kind of walk you through the process a bit. And then if you look up percussion or drum notation, it'll walk you through the process of using the drum set editor here. While I'm here, are there any there's a few things that are really kind of bug fixes, but are nice bug fixes that make it almost feel like another feature. So one of the things that has long existed, I have too many staves here. I'm going to just shrink down a little bit. Yeah, it keeps wanting to go down. I'm just going to get rid of some of those staves. So I press I, and I'm just going to, actually I'll just hide them. Why not? Because you can hide staves. If you didn't know that, now you do. Okay. I just pressed 0, so I'm going to be scattered here because as things come up, hiring Martin Tantacruel was a great move. All right, so I hit Control 0, and you can see down at the bottom of my screen the shortcuts. Control 0 is the shortcut for 100% zoom. Well, a lot of people really like to use the setting of page width as a zoom setting. And there didn't used to be a shortcut for it, nor did there used to be a way to set that to be the default. But now you can go to Edit, Preferences, and under, I think, Canvas, you can set the default zoom to be page width. And now that's the default. You can also, and by the way, notice when I pressed OK there, the dialog went away after just a second or two. Before 3.5, it actually took several seconds to process preferences, and so that's another one of these improvements made. Well, if you go to Edit, Preferences, Shortcuts, and then down here I search for, say, width, I can define a shortcut here. So I'm going to define that shortcut to be, I don't know, I'm going to use, I don't know what to use. I'll use Control Tick. Zoom key. Oh, I already set that one to be something else, I see. Because that wasn't a default shortcut. That's okay. Let me try just plain tick. All right, there we go. So tick, if I go Control 0, that's 100% zoom. Tick, oops. Boy, I thought I did that, but maybe I forgot to do the thing. So zoom to page width. Boy, I sure look like I did that. Did I do semicolon? Is that what I did? I don't even know what the heck that is. I can't even tell. Let me clear that guy. Let me just try this again. Tick. Add. Yeah. I'm going to try something else because I don't know that tick actually works. Let's try tilde. Oh, that's another one that I've previously customized. Sorry about this, guys. Let me try single quote. Okay, single quote it is. Add. So now, hopefully, single quote, there you go, is my shortcut for page width. And it will actually toggle between that and whatever you were at before, which is kind of nice. All right, so back to, I was going to cover about this anyhow, the logo change tweak was something that happened before we even hired Martin, I think. So within the drums set, there is a mode of entry that's popular among percussionists where you enter the rhythm first, because maybe you're not actually using a whole drum set. Really, it's just going to be a snare part. I could have entered a snare instrument, but let's just be this. And really, you just want to enter the rhythm, and it's going to be the same pitch over and over again. So you really don't want to have to keep selecting the pitch and the rhythm. It's going to be the same pitch. So there's this cool mode where you just press 5, 4, 4, 5, 3, 3, 3, 3, 5, right? I guess I hit one too many times. Let's undo that a couple times. 5. Right? So when I'm doing this, though, unfortunately, it doesn't know what pitch to use, right? So if I enter one note, let me go to a next measure here, and enter the note I actually want, which was the snare, A. Now, when I press the durations, it's just going to keep using the same duration, the same note that you had already entered. Previous to 3.5, that wasn't the case. It would keep using whatever it thought was the default drum to enter. So you couldn't keep entering a bunch of notes of the same pitch. Also, the R command repeats the previous note. And apparently doesn't keep the stem direction. But anyhow, so that also is a way of repeating the previous note, and that didn't work in drum staves. Another thing that didn't work before that is improved now is you can use the R command in normal mode. Like right here, I just clicked that C, R, and now I've got another one. So that is another just a little improvement to how these little details work, how certain details of node input node work, how that repeat previous note command works. So lots of little tweaks like that. Here's another one that's a little bit not exactly related, but just related enough that I'm going to talk about it. Let me enter some lyrics here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Whenever I need to enter lyrics, this is what I typically go with. Let's say I want to select just lyrics 2 through 4. Now, you could do it by going 2 and then control click the 3. What if I want to go 2 through 5? That's like 4 steps. I have to click each one of those individually, control click them individually. Not anymore. Now you can click the 2, shift click the 5, and it selects everything in between there. And this works not only for lyrics. This has always worked for notes, right? You select one note, shift click another, and it selects everything in that range. But now it works also for lyrics. It works for chord symbols. Ooh, let's look at my lead sheet here. If I want to select all these chord symbols here at letter A, I click that one, shift click that one, and just those 2 lines worth of lyrics are selected. It's embarrassing to say how little work it took to implement that and how useful it is. It's like one of these things that why on earth didn't we do that years ago? But we've done it now. So something I'm very happy to have. Okay, so I talked about a little bit with zoom. Oh, another little thing about zoom I should mention. Here's 0. That's 100% zoom. If I start zooming out, or zooming out smaller, the steps are now smaller. It used to be the steps were kind of weird. They were these big giant steps, and it actually depended on your monitor resolution, I think. Now the steps are consistent, and I'm going back up again, and they end up at 100, right? So this is control minus and then control plus. On my system, control plus doesn't actually work because plus is above equals, and it depends on your keyboard layout. So I customize that to be control equals. But notice the step sizes are very consistent: 100, 89, 79, 71, whatever. It's some percentage rounded off. And it rounds off very nicely, so you end up really back at 100. And they're actually the same sizes you end up going through if I start well, I forget, but if you're zooming with the mouse, no, if I'm also zooming with my fingers here on the keyboard, you can't tell that, but I'm using a pinch here. And we're also trying to make that behave a little more reasonably. So the whole, everything around zooming has improved a bit here. So as far as other big features that people have been wanting for a long time, one of them has to do with continuous view. So I'm going to switch to continuous view here. And now I'm going to start playing this score. Oh, can I put chord symbols back on, please? Because, otherwise it's kind of pointless. So, notice what's happening here. The cursor is staying mostly still while the score is scrolling. That's not how it worked before. In fact, that's not how it works by default now. To get that smooth scrolling, you go to Edit, Preferences, Advanced. And here under Advanced, you'll see all these settings about smooth pan. So I guess I don't even know what this smooth pan cursor is. Reset to default. What's the default? The default was on. Let me set all of these things. Well, that was enabled if the default here was not enabled. Just so you can see what that looks like. Here's what it used to be, right? The cursor would keep moving while the score stays still. Then it jumps, right? This is what it used to look like. So with that green cursor is just showing me. To be honest, I'm not totally sure. It's tracking something that is useful when you're reading. Is what it's supposed to be used for. To be honest, I haven't really played with it that much, just enough to see that it works. So I now enable smooth pan, and then there's all these settings in here that tweak how it works. Oops, I didn't want to do that one, but I do want to set all these back because I have played with these settings before, and to be honest, this has to do with the speed by which things go, and I just want everything to be at the defaults because I'm assuming that it knows the person who implemented it, Sergio's actually, who was a guest on my show a couple months ago. Oh, I see. Notice how the green cursor here is staying completely still, whereas the blue cursor follows each note, but the green cursor is staying still. And so there's presumably a reason why you might want that or not want that. So you have an option to either display it or not. So so all these little ergonomics improvements, there's lots of these ergonomic improvements, and chances are I'm going to forget to mention some because there were a lot of little ones. There's one I can tell you about right now that is a little ergonomic improvement. It was one that was made a while ago and then sort of inadvertently backed out. Let me enter some notes. I'm going to double click this C. If you double click a note and then use the arrow key, I'm using the right arrow, you see that changes its offset. It's actually changing the offset here. Notice it's 6.4 now, right? As I continue to hit the right arrow, that this number is going up and up and up. And as I hit left arrow, it goes down and down and down and down. I get all the way back where I was, get down into the negative range, it moves that note closer to the previous note, etc. So that is what the arrow does. But if you look at my score that has multiple staves, that particular adjustment is literally just adjusting that note. Notice how the other note that it should have lined up with is stayed still. Sometimes the adjustment you want to make is to actually move all the notes together. That adjustment is here in the inspector called the leading space. So I'm going to reset that note with Control R. And if I use the leading space adjustment here, you can see that it's kind of moving all of, it's moving beat 2 across all staves. Sometimes that's what you want. Well, you can use the inspector for that, but now as of 3.5, you can double click and use Control, nope, Shift, yes, Shift plus right arrow. Shift plus right arrow does the leading space adjustment. Control, what you see it does is the same thing it does almost everywhere. Right and left arrow move by a fraction, like 0.1 of a tenth of a staff space. Control plus an arrow key moves in a full staff space at a time. So yeah, that's another little tweak in how these things work. That's just a nice little usability improvement. All right, so I'm trying to make sure I hit the big features, but as I hit the big features, little ones that show up feel like they're worth mentioning. This score doesn't have. Yes, it does. It has it doesn't have a header, but it has a footer here. You can see it because the page number's there. Now, the way you edit that footer, if I wanted to put like a copyright message in it or something like that, the way you would normally edit the footer is you'd go to, not edit, Format, Style, Header, Footer. And there's your header and footer options. Well, now it's a bit easier than that. I think I can double click this guy. Yes, double click that header. double click that footer, and now it brings me right to that dialog. I think I can also right click it, and it lets me, what? Copy that text? No, I can't cut that text. So I guess right click doesn't actually do anything reasonable. I was thinking it did. Um, but anyhow, double click certainly does. It takes me right to this. I was thinking it was going to give me the option to go to the style, but I don't see style in here, because then I could have set the style of that also. But I guess that's not implemented. So being able to just get directly to the header and the footer is a nice little improvement. So are we working? Yes. So that's the good news. So VST, virtual, I don't know what that stands for, to be honest. But it's basically a system of loading up. Like, we use what's called sound fonts to play instruments, and they're basically just pre-recorded samples, and it's played back within a synthesis engine within MuseScore. That's, it does what it does. But there's this whole virtual synthesizer technology, maybe that's what VST stands for, that's much more sophisticated that digital audio workstations use, and MuseScore can communicate with a digital audio workstation via what's called Jack. If you do a grep, what am I saying? I'm talking Linux here. If you do a web search for Jack, you can find out about that, how you can connect to one. But we want to make that process easier, and we want to maybe try to work with this VST technology a little more directly. So MuseScore 4 is actually going to be a big, huge deal, and we've announced some kind of basic plans for what that might look like, but to be honest, I don't remember what those are. But if you do a search for MuseScore 4 on the forums, you'll see this big post announcing the plans there, and they're huge for how we're going to improve everything having to do with the playback and things like that. So yes. So yeah, there are licensing issues involved with doing some of this, the things that we'd want to do, and we're trying to work those out. A lot of the stuff that's can't be done within the open source world, but some things can, and I'm not up on the details. One of the big ones, though, is a software called Note Performer that a lot of people really like using with Finale and Sibelius. And so our goal is to do everything that we need to do to work out all the appropriate license agreements and do what's necessarily technically to be able to work with Note Performer, and that's high on the agenda list. So, so entering 2 lines of text for the footer. Oh yeah, so yeah, that's actually true. If you want to have multiple lines of text, you do it by actually copying and pasting. But you can do it right here directly, right? I could enter my copyright message here. I don't have one. I could just say Beethoven wrote this a long time ago. And then say it is public domain. So yeah, you can enter all that info directly into the dialog here, and then you have your I did that on the odd pages, sorry. So that's a way to have multiple lines of text there. Just do it directly in the footer. But yeah, if you technically want it to be associated with the copyright specifically, here under File, Score Properties, the copyright field here is only a single line. So yeah, you'd have to copy and paste it into there. Oh, sorry, that's Composer. There's that. So yes, that's still a thing. And the same with the copyright symbol. You'd have to copy and paste the copyright symbol from somewhere else into here. Kind of a drag. If you want to get that copyright symbol really easily, I can double click any piece of text, hit F2, or use this icon over here, the lower left, to get to the special characters, and then click my copyright symbol. And now I can copy that copyright symbol, go back to Score Properties, and paste it in. So yes, it's a little clumsy. We all know that, but this is how it is. Oh, okay. So yeah. So for brass, when MuseScore 4 comes, now this is 3.5. It took us what, a year and a half from the release of MuseScore 3 to get to MuseScore 3.5. I don't know that it's going to take another year and a half to get to MuseScore 4, but it is a very big release. But it has a lot of people working on it very hard also. And this work only just began. But I don't be expecting it in the next couple of months. But, a year and a half, I would expect it to be out in a year and a half. But that's just me, just guessing, really. So, there you go. All right, so let me look again at my list of sort of major features and other things that I want to make sure, and I see that a lot of the things I've already talked about. All right, so let me talk about chord symbol alignment, since I've talked about, what the hell did I do? Oh well. I'm going to undo everything I just did in here because I don't want to mess up my lead sheet. In fact, I just undid myself into a crash. Does that look like it happened? Nope, I didn't. It just sort of hung up. I just closed it because I was afraid that I hadn't undone far enough and I got nervous, but that's okay. Let's get this guy back, and I want to show you something about the alignment of the chord symbols. So if I look at, is there a measure? Oh yeah, look at this section here at letter B. These chord symbols are not all aligned with each other, and that's because I set a default height for them, but this one had to get higher to clear everything else that's there, and nothing else needed to, and so they're not aligned. Now, I'm personally okay with that, at least sometimes. If there's just like a little bit out of alignment, sometimes it bugs me, and I'd rather, like this guy here is a little bit out of alignment with the others. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Format, Style, Chord Symbols, and now you'll see Maximum Shift Above. Watch what happens when I increase that guy. Now, where's the one that was only a little bit off? Oh, I'm covering it. Here we go. So you can see that this guy here is just a little bit too high, I think. So let me change this maximum shift above. There we go. And notice everything else, I just raised it a bit. Everything else kind of raised now to match it. It looks like it actually matched. There must have been something else on that line that it's actually... Oh, it's this guy's here over here. So they actually all raised to meet that. But not everything did. Because I basically set a parameter for how much of that I want. And I actually made it bigger than I really intended to. So if I go back there, Format Style, and let me just set this to 2. Now it's going to move things if it can get away with only moving it no more than 2 spaces. So these guys only needed to move up 2 spaces to become aligned. But this guy would have had to move more than 2 spaces to align with this, so it didn't bother. To me, that's actually pretty good. If I can get away with alignment, only moving things a little bit, I'm happy. But if something is like a major outlier, I'm just going to let it be an outlier. So that maximum shift above gives you that. You can just set this threshold, how much you want it to, how hard you want it to try to align things, basically, and it won't try if it's going to exceed that threshold. And then there's a separate setting for below. So if you put your chord symbols below, or if using Roman numeral analysis, then those below will, similarly, you can control their alignment. So that's another new feature. Speaking of alignment, measure numbers. One of the things with measure numbers is, do I have measure numbers on here? No, I don't, because it's a lead sheet. The default position for measure numbers is, at the beginning of a system. But what if you really want them? Can I actually double click this now? No. I right click. I was wondering if that maybe got also the same treatment that headers did, where I could just get directly to the style setting. But I go to style, measure numbers, and say I want them on every measure. Where's every measure? Oh, interval 1. That's a little clumsy, actually, but there it is, interval 1. So now I've got it on every measure. Well, some people who put them on every measure don't actually want them centered on the bar line like this. They actually want it centered in the measure. So I can actually do that. Horizontal placement you see here is left, but if I set it to center, and then set as style. Now, because whichever one I did must have done it, and now I forgot which one it was, but I hit set as style, and you can see that all the measure numbers are set centered. And I can make them be below. And again, I did it for one of them, and I guess it doesn't take effect. Oh, there it goes. Okay. And my inspector isn't quite big enough. I like to get my inspector just big enough to not need the scroll bar. All right, so now they're all below. So you can have your measure numbers be below the staff instead of above the staff. So, and you can have it be centered. So that's something new for how measure numbers work. Also relating to measure numbers is the idea of multi-measure rests. When I generate parts from this thing, and parts is another thing I want to talk about in a second, I'll just generate all the parts. If I look at one of the parts, you'll see multi-measure rest here. Well, it used to be you didn't have much control over the appearance of these things, but now you'll see, well, here's number position. I can change that. If I want my numbers to be, say, on the staff, I can have that. My battery's low. No, my battery's not low. Hold on. Ah, there we go. It wasn't quite plugged in. Okay, so yeah, so I can make that be the style setting also, and now all my numbers are on the staff. And I think there's some other settings. If I go to Format, Style, Notes, maybe? I'm not, to be honest, I don't remember where the settings, no. The reason I thought that might be under Notes is that because rest settings are there. But generally, here we go, minimum vertical position upper, there's that one there. So I think that's all there is, because these settings have always been there. There's additional settings coming in MuseScore 4 also, and that's what I interviewed Isaac about a couple months ago. So, but at least that setting is there, and maybe there's some other style setting that I'm not thinking of, but that is at least one of them right there. I'm looking at what else. So some of the things are just little tweaks that kind of, I think, make a fairly big difference, and one of them has to do with what did I do? What am I doing here? Am I in edit mode? Maybe I am. There we go. Okay. What if I have a note here and then I want to put a tremolo marking on it? Tremolo over here. This didn't used to look very good. The tremolo markings were going to collide with the ledger lines. Well, and a lot of other issues with tremolo placement is fixed. Also, what if you want to put a tremolo between these notes? We get this thing, but those of you who play the piano know there's another style of tremolo that we often see for these sort of rolled chords, and if I click that tremolo marking, come here under stroke style, attached to stems, and now I get this look, which pianists especially will be familiar with. So that's another little tweak we've put. What elements anchor? Anchor text to the bottom of the page. Well, that's what a footer is. A footer is anchored to the bottom of the page. You can also put in a text frame, and that's not anchored to a note. So other than that, there's not a way to put something on one particular page other than by using a frame, which is normally how you'd want it, because that page wouldn't, I mean, what if the font changes and the measure that went with isn't at the bottom of the page anymore? You kind of need it to move with the measure. So frames move with measures, but not by specific notes. So that's generally how you'd want to do that. Or you use a footer, which is going to be attached to all pages. So, I mean, I'm just going to keep going here because there's still more stuff to talk about. So with tremolo, I talked about those things. I also wanted to talk about note head style. So one of the things that was new in MuseScore 3 was the ability to have note names in the note heads. And the way you would get at that is through staff properties. You'd go right-click, staff properties, advanced style properties, and then you can set the note head scheme to be pitch names. And that would set all of the notes to have note names within the note heads. But what if you don't want them all? What if you just want a few? Well, I can just select the notes I want, and then here, under the note section of the inspector, head scheme, pitch names. Bam. And so just the notes I've selected now have that scheme. So that's also new with 3.5. So when I talked about parts, I want to come back to my score for parts with parts here for a second. And what if I have, like here, I've got, oh yeah, that's right, because I hit a few things. But let me just go ahead and add some more notes to the flute part and put them in another voice. So I'll put them in voice 2. We have had a feature that we didn't really advertise too heavily because frankly it didn't work. It didn't work very well. Lots of things went wrong, and I don't know how the instrument change is going to go with this, so I'm going to save myself the trouble and delete some of this other stuff. I've got 2 voices on here. Well, what, and I did that because maybe one is the flute 1 and one of them is flute 2. And then here, maybe it's, well, I'll just enter some stuff into, maybe it's that, and then maybe it's the same thing. It's going to be some more. Oops, what did I? Oh, I'm in rhythm mode. That's what's going on. I want to go to regular input mode. Okay, so if I then, let me just put a note in here too. All right. I can go to File, Parts. Oops, that's not what I meant. File, Parts. And then I can say I want a new part, a single part, and it's going to be called Flute 1. And it's going to have flute, just voice 1. So I'll hide the other voices. Then I'm going to create another part, call it Flute 2. And yeah, this process is clumsy, and it's part of the stuff that we're going to try to improve in MuseScore 4 as well. So I add, again, the flute instrument, but this time I say I want voice 2 and turn off the other guys. Well, when I do this, you'll see I now have a flute 1 part that has just the voice 1 notes, the C's, and a flute 2 part that has just the voice 2 notes. This feature was in MuseScore 3, so it's been around for like a year and a half, but a lot of things went wrong, such as key signatures, key changes did not show up in the flute 2 part. A lot of other things didn't work right. We think we fixed pretty much everything that we realized was broken that people reported, and so now I think this feature is actually usable. So if you want to have 2 flute parts on a single staff, which is the way orchestral music is typically notated, really, you can have that now. Okay, let me hop back to the chat for a second, see what I'm missing here. Yeah, so being able to extract voices is cool, and now it actually works. So other new features, one of them here is worth mentioning here, has to do with editing of lines. And by lines, let me go back here, I mean things like a hairpin. So I'm going to select that and add a crescendo. Well, what if you didn't want it to go all the way to the end of the measure? I selected the measure and just pressed the shortcut, the less than sign, because it looks like a crescendo. If I wanted it shorter than that, well, really the way to do that is, let me select it and just hit delete. Really the way you want to do that is select the range of notes you want it to apply to, and then just hit the shortcut, and it adds just to that range. But there might be times when you've added it, you might have used drag and drop because you didn't know about that, right? You might have just dragged that thing from the palette because that's the only way you knew to do it, and that just has to guess. Well, if you do that now, you would then try to adjust the length of it, and it never used to work to adjust the length. You would see the dotted line still went to the end of the measure. The line would get shorter, but it would still logically connect there. Well, now when I drag it, you see the actual anchor adjust, and notice how it actually adjusts. It had to adjust to avoid that low note there, but now it doesn't. I think that's not new. So anyhow, now dragging actually works the way it people expect it to work. So yeah, you can still fine tune to some extent in here, but as soon as you get to a certain point, it snaps. Um, Now, is that a little bit annoying that it snaps? Because maybe I just want to find some point in between here. I don't know. There might be cases where that's not exactly what you want, and that's something that's being talked about right now. How we can maybe improve this further to allow for a little better fine tuning of things. But for now, at least it does what people have always expected. By the way, the official way, Control R. Notice how after I did that adjusting, now I end up with something that's a little wonky. The hairpin is like not totally lined up because it's letting me drag. It just moved the anchors. But if I now want it to really line up correctly relative to those anchors, I just hit Control R and it resets to keeps the anchors the same, but lines everything up correctly relative to those anchors. So yeah, that's something that we hope will make a big difference because a lot of beginners would get that wrong. For the record, the official way to adjust a line has always been Shift plus left or Shift plus right. That's been the official way to adjust a line and adjust the anchor. But now dragging does that also. So, is there a way to drag the logical anchor point independently without changing the visuals? So, no, and that's what I said about what I mean about maybe wanting some more adjustment. Like there might be cases where, for whatever reason, look at this. Three. See? There might be a situation where I really want this. I really want the crescendo to be across all four notes, but I really don't want the crescendo. And so for playback purposes, I really want it on all four notes, but I don't want it that low, right? I really want it to tuck in here. So I would like to do that by just adjusting the endpoints so that it can tuck in better. I think I'm still hitting, to be honest, I don't know why this isn't tucking in at this point. Oh, I guess I need to hit Control R because it had already adjusted. But at this point, the endpoints are now the interior notes. They're not technically this. So the playback won't be exactly right. The last note won't be included. You'd never hear the difference in this example, but you can probably come up with another example in which, yeah, you might want it to be shorter than it really is because otherwise it's in the way of something, but you want the playback to be longer because a human musician would figure it out. And no, there's currently not a way to do that really. At least not that I know of. There might be some tricky way involving the inspector, maybe to make that happen, or to add one version of. You could add the line twice, where once you have the playback right, and once you have the visuals right, and make the visual one not playback, and make the playback one invisible. Yeah, that would be a workaround if you ever need that. Realistically, we need to make something like Shift plus drag not adjust the anchor or something like that. So there's some possibilities also. Choosing the vertical note for Glissandos. I don't know that one changed, but maybe it does. But let's see. If the way you do Glissandos normally is just select the first note and hit the Gliss. I'll use the wavy one, and it just automatically goes there. So there shouldn't be anything to adjust there. It should just sort of do things, I don't know, correctly. But I guess maybe if you have a chord and you're trying to adjust it to a specific note in the chord, there we go. I adjusted it there, and the anchor did change. And then when I hit Control R again, it lines up perfectly. So there are some things you can do with glissando lines also. But as far as I know, I don't know that changed. I think this was mostly just about the horizontal lines, hairpins and voltas and things like that. All right. So as far as the sort of major features, I've actually covered just about everything. I'm looking at the list and I actually see only two other things that I definitely wanted to mention. So 3. All right, one of them is a thing that people have asked for is a way to select by beat. Like, what if you had chord symbols on beats 1 and beats 3, and then you just wanted to delete all the ones on beat 3? So I'll enter one here, G, and then I'll hit semicolon to go by beat. Oops. See. And you want to just select by beat 3. You want to select all the chord symbols on beat 3. Well, I can right-click, G, select, more, same beat. And now just the chord symbols on beat 3 are selected, so I can delete them or change their playback style or do whatever else I want. So that's another nice little feature that people have requested and wasn't too hard to add, so we added it. The other thing that I mentioned, oh yeah, so next system, there's some other shortcuts for navigation. If I go to the shortcuts here and then I search for system, you'll see go to next system, go to previous system. So if I define a shortcut for, say, I don't know if this one's, did I just change my, I did, yeah, because that is actually the shortcut in another program that I'm using to broadcast with. So let me clear those guys and let's try, I don't know what the heck I haven't used, control, comma, there we go. Now you see how I end up in these situations because I define all sorts of crazy shortcuts. So control, comma will now, if I select a rest here and then say control, comma, it moved the selection here and continues to move. It didn't play the note back though. That's interesting. Oh yeah, it did. Okay, so there's a shortcut for that. And a couple other little, this one is actually not so small, but it won't take long to talk about. If I have some notes in voice 1, and then I want to enter some notes in voice 2, voice 2, but there's a rest, say, on beat 1. And then all right, this rest looks good. It's avoiding the note here, and that was always the case because we knew to shift the rest down a little bit, but we always shifted it down by a fixed amount. It didn't always shift down. It only it basically shifted down that much. But if the note were if the voice 1 note were down here, the rest didn't move far enough. Now it does. So that's something. Also, where possible, we now let voices combine. And this one's a little harder to explain what I mean by this, but here you go. That's an example right there. That's C. Voice 1 and voice 2 both had the C, and we let the notes combine. There's more to it than that. It has to do with whether or not we show the rest there also. So there's a lot of subtle changes in this. Also, whether or not rests merge. Like if I have voice 1 has a rest and then a couple notes, and then voice 2 also has a rest and then a couple of notes. Normally the rests don't merge because we want to see the voices independently, but if you don't like it that way, under staff properties, merge matching rests, then on that staff, the matching rests will merge. So there's been some nice improvements. Oh, I know what it was. It was stem direction. What if this note here is that high? Well, this note is stem up because there's a rest down here. Well, what if I didn't need, I don't really need that rest. Let me change this to some eighth notes so it looks a little more. So this voice 2 enters mid measure, but voice 1 is kind of all by himself. There's nothing in voice 1. If I wanted to hide that rest, there's no reason for voice 1 to still be stem up, but it used to always be. Now, if I hide that rest, you see the voice 1 note goes stem down. So there's little improvements like this to how things are done. So that now actually nails everything that I know to talk about. I can tell you that there are some improvements in the piano roll editor. So those of you who like playing around with this, there are improvements in here. I can't really tell you exactly what they are, but I do know they exist. So a lot, right? I covered a lot of things here. There's a lot of stuff. Oh yeah, so as far as hiding note heads to make them merge, no, they would always merge if the note heads were the same. But like here, if this was a dotted eighth instead of an eighth, then the note heads would be separate so that you could be clear about, oh, the dot goes with this note, not with that note. It would separate them. But if it was a context where it was clear from the context and you didn't worry about it, then you could make one note head invisible and they would merge. Or instead of making it invisible, you could come over to the inspector and explicitly set, it's not the head group, but the head type to quarter, because it will merge matching head types, and dots would prevent that from working, but if you force it to be the same head type as the other one, that would cause them to merge also. So yeah, that was the thing. And yeah, I so many new things here. I momentarily got things confused, but yeah, that was the deal with the rest. So that's a lot of new stuff. Some relatively big things, some small quality of life things, and there's a couple other little things that just didn't even quite make my list. A lot of bug fixes that I guess I'll mention one bug fix that a friend of mine, an online friend, Richard Tabnick, had been asking about for a long time. We've known about it for a long time, years, and it's finally fixed now where, oh, it's not about repeats. If I have a piece that ends with a rest, and then I select the whole thing and turn on loop playback. Actually, let me just select this. It actually plays correctly, which isn't, you expect it to play back correctly, but it didn't. If you had a loop set up and there were rests at the end of the score, it would just say, you don't need to hear those rests, and it would loop without the rests, and that kind of messed things up. So that works now. You're welcome, Richard. There you go. So let me wrap up. Those of you who are still with me, thanks for sticking with me. And let me just post in a couple other links to a couple things that might be useful. Here's one. Some of you who are, especially the new people, found out about it because you're on my newsletter mailing list that I've really only just started actually sending out. I've been thinking about this for years, but now I am actually doing a newsletter. So let me give you the link to where you can sign up for the newsletter if you aren't on it. If you didn't already get an email this morning telling you about this, then you're not on my newsletter. And so now you click this link, you give me an email address, and you can tell me, because I'm going to send some things out that are MuseScore, but I talk about music also, music theory stuff, and maybe you don't care about that. Well, then don't check that box. Or maybe you only care about that and don't care about MuseScore. Whatever, you can tell me which of these things you're interested in, and then I'll only bug you about those things. And I'm not going to be sending out a lot of stuff, and it's going to be good stuff. I'm just going to tell you, hey, MuseScore 3.5 is out, and here I got the Café coming up, and stuff like that. Oh, wait a minute. Octave clefs. Octave clefs are definitely a thing. We do support them. If you want to elaborate on what your question is, I can try to answer that. So I did post that, and then I also always have to put in a plug for my online course to help you learn MuseScore. Now, all this new stuff isn't in the course yet. I'm going to have to update some lessons to cover this. And what I might do is just put this video in the course as a starting point so that people who want to learn what's new in 3.5 can just watch this video. It's a long video, right? But there's a lot of stuff covered in it that's not otherwise in the course. Might take me a little while to get the course updated. But anyhow, the course covers everything else there is to know about MuseScore. And I now have it kind of bundled with my theory course. If you don't want it, that's fine. You can click just the MuseScore course. But the bundled course is kind of nice because then you also get the theory course for basically one price. So I have to put in that plug. Also here, I'll just say online course. There we go. Yes, anything music. So by all means, if you aren't already on that mailing list, check off all those boxes. The last one was for educators specifically because I do have some stuff I send out that's specifically geared towards educators. And if you're interested, great. If not, then that's great too. Um, yeah, I managed to cram a lot into only barely over an hour, so I'm happy about that. So next week, I'll tell you what I want to do. I'm always open to new suggestions of things to talk about, and so definitely, drop me an email, Mark at MuseScore, Mark with a C at MuseScore.com will get to me. Or just leave a comment here on the video about subjects you'd like me to talk about in upcoming cafes. But I'll tell you what's on my mind now. I mentioned that theory course in school is just about to start up, and I teach a theory course. And ear training is like this subject that I have a love-hate relationship with. I mean, I rely on my ear a ton as a jazz musician, but the way ear training is usually dealt with isn't I'll just say doesn't work for me. And I have some ideas about this. And one of the things that's also come up, you all know, many of you know that I do a lot of work with blind musicians and making MuseScore work with blind musicians. And the idea, and I've made my music theory course accessible to blind musicians, it's occurred to me that you should be able to teach theory through the use of ear training totally by ear. In other words, I shouldn't need written handouts. I shouldn't need videos with visuals. I should be able to teach you what you need to know about music theory totally by ear. So ear training and music theory training should be able to be combined in a way that's done totally by ear, just listen to. And so I've had that idea on my mind for the better part of a year, and just in the last couple of weeks, it's really kind of hit me. That's a podcast. So I think I'm going to launch a podcast. This is my idea. I'm going to launch a podcast where I do ear training theory, ear training I'm thinking calling it ear cross training for music theory or something like that. Music theory and ear cross training. I don't know. But the idea will be I'm going to try to teach theoretical concepts through the use of purely audio, just purely by talking, singing, playing, and really try to and listening to music. So I'm gonna like play around with those ideas some, and that's actually what I want to do for my cafe next time. So we're gonna talk some about ear training. I think that is my thinking, and then maybe you can give me some ideas about how my podcast might go, and then I can try to launch the thing. Um, uh, Launch it next month. So, general schedule of cafe. Okay, so general schedule of this is it's always Wednesdays and it's always this time. So this time so I'm in Colorado. It's 10:30 for me always. Now the deal is if you're in the United States, that you can get from there. It's 12:30 Eastern time always. If you're outside the United States, now we're dealing with separate time zone things. And actually, if you're in Arizona, I think you don't use daylight savings time, so it's different, right? But also, if you're in different countries and you're relative to GMT, the adjustments differ. So it's hard for me to know. It's always 12:30 Eastern. Right now, it's 16:30 GMT. So that's basically when it is. So would I definitely normally I'm going to try to get notifications out sooner, but it's always this time. There's a number of reasons why why the newsletter I sent out today wasn't earlier. Also, I would say you can subscribe if you're watching this on video, right? There's a subscribe button somewhere there, and I think you get an hour's notice on those. To be honest, I'm still just learning how all these notification stuff works, but I'm trying to be better about staying in touch with people. I've been doing it weekly through these cafes, but I haven't been like reaching out by email and saying, hey guys, here's what's coming up in the cafe or whatever. So I'm going to start doing that, and I'm going to start doing it. I don't know that I'm going to send out an email literally every week saying what's coming in the cafe. If you guys want it, I will. But maybe it'll be combined with some other little tidbit of information. Hey, here's some useful trick, some useful tip about MuseScore. And same with theory. If you're interested in theory, maybe I'll try to send out a tip every month, every week, or whatever. I just want to be communicating more. Let you guys know what's going on within the world of MuseScore, and do more to like share things with you other than having you watch an hour-long YouTube video. Just ways of just getting little snippets of information more regularly. So my bad on not having been doing this the last few years, because I've really missed out on an opportunity to build some community here, but we're also isolated right now. I just feel like I just want to be reaching out more, and that's part of what's going on. So that's my spiel, and okay. So let's see. Yeah, YouTube. I wouldn't trust the YouTube notifications. I think they come out when YouTube says they should, but it's always this time, so you can rely on that. But I think I'm going to try to send out. I think I'm going to just send out an email like once a week. So if you're on that newsletter, if that's like a real problem for you to see that, let me know. But my guess is a short little email once a week that just says, hey, here's what's coming up in the cafe, and here's a little tip. That feels good. That feels like we're staying connected, and you know what's happening, and you get a little reminder. Gives me that much incentive to decide on my topic, because to be honest, sometimes I decide on the topic like an hour ahead of time. Sometimes I've known it a couple weeks ahead of time. So, but I'd like to be a little better about being able to plan. So, there you go. Blender's good in the just getting notifications. Yeah. So I that's the thing, is I totally don't want to get into any situation where anything I'm putting out gets marked as spam, or it gets perceived as spam. That's actually more important, more to the point. So anyhow, I don't want to just keep blabbing here, because it's just going to make the video look longer and make people not want to watch it, right? So I'm going to wrap up. Feel free to keep dropping comments and so forth, or shoot me emails. If you're already on the newsletter, you can feel free to just reply to that. That'll come right to me. Leave comments here. Write me, Marc with a C at MuseScore.com. Post to the forum. Do any of the things that'll get to me, and I'm happy to hear what you have to say. So I'm going to sign off here, and I hope to see you all next week. Thanks a lot. Bye.